Russian families say goodbye to their loved ones as President Putin orders reservist troops to the battlefield as part of his mobilisation mandate. The self-declared People's Republic of Luhansk in occupied Ukraine prepares for a referendum on joining Russia, but British intelligence warns the outcome is fixed. Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi says the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in police custody must be investigated as violent protests continue across the country. Scenes like these are becoming the norm all over Russia. A family bids a heartbroken farewell to one of its members who is leaving for the front. Tens of thousands of Russians have been called to the battlefield in Ukraine, and this might just be the first phase. Hackers claiming to have broken into the Defence Ministry's website say they have found a list of military recruits totalling 1 million people. Independent Russian media says that Moscow is forcibly drafting civilians, even those arrested in anti-war protests. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says, by the way, total mobilisation has been conducted in Ukraine for many years within the entire adult population, including women. Kyiv has recruited them into the ranks of Ukrainian nationalist battalions and the Ukrainian armed forces. But Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky says 55,000 Russian soldiers have died in this war in 6 months. Tens of thousands are wounded, maimed. Do you want more? No. Then protest, fight, run away or surrender to Ukrainian captivity. These are the options for you to survive. Many Russians have decided to escape this compulsory mobilisation through international airports. But others are trying to escape over land to countries such as Finland. However, a number of European countries are considering restricting visas for Russian citizens as much as possible.
Criticism rains down on Russia at the UN Security Council after President Putin decreed the mobilization of more troops to fight in Ukraine and once again dangling nuclear threat. The UN Secretary General says it's intolerable.
The idea of a nuclear conflict, once unthinkable, is today evoked by some. That alone is unacceptable.
Antonio Guterres vows accountability will be met regarding the alleged war crimes in Ukraine. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine then took to the floor.
There will be no peace without justice. I emphasized that none of the Russian crimes in Ukraine would have been possible without the crime of aggression against Ukraine committed by Russian leadership. It cannot go unpunished. And the only feasible way to put President Putin and his entourage on trial is to establish a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine.
His Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, defended himself by accusing Ukraine of allegations of crimes perpetrated by Kyiv since 2014. Lavrov later stormed out of the assembly.
We do not keep any confidence to the International Criminal Court anymore. During the last 8 years, we waited for nothing for the fight against impunity in Ukraine. And we do not count on them or other international institutions. The time of waiting is over.
Staring right down the camera, the head of US diplomacy then declared only one man can bring about peace.
How has this aggression against Ukraine by President Putin improved the lives or prospects of a single Russian citizen? One man chose this war. One man can end it. Because if Russia stops fighting, the war ends. If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine ends.
Notably, foreign ministers of China and India defended the territorial integrity of Ukraine and advocated dialogue as a solution to the conflict.
Russia is preparing referenda in the territory seized from Ukraine. In Luhansk, ballots were printed in a hurry in time for voting, which begins Friday. But British intelligence says the outcome has already been decided. In these territories, the results will suggest residents voted yes to annexation. And as of next week, Moscow will consider Luhansk to be part of Russia. This reporter says, will you vote in the referendum? This resident says yes, because I'm for Russia, for all of us. So to say the Donbass residents. While this local resident says we want some kind of clarity and stability. We will go to take part in the referendum. Well, this man says Russia is a powerful country. It's the future, the power, the truth. So to be part of Russia is our big, how shall I put it, desire. We have been waiting for this for so long. From September 23rd to the 27th, the occupied territories of Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhia will hold these votes, which will not be recognised by any country that is not a close ally of Russia. Experts say that the objective of these express referenda is for Russia to declare that Ukrainian attacks on these areas are attacks on Russian soil and will allow Moscow to respond more forcefully.
Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi has acknowledged the state is investigating the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old girl who died in the custody of the morality police for not wearing the veil properly. Protests have swept the country since the incident, but the president has accused the West of double standards over what happened. When these incidents occur all over the world, he says, the same standard must be applied to them. Calling for investigations only on this issue, why not call for the exact same thing for those who lose their lives at the hands of law enforcement and other agents throughout the West, Europe, North America and the United States of America? Those who suffer unjust beatings, he says. Why are there no investigations that follow? At least 9 people have been killed in the crackdown on the widespread protests, but the demonstrations show no signs of winding down. In addition to the violent repression of the demonstrations, the authorities have cut off social networks in the country, such as WhatsApp and Facebook, although they claim these are only partial cuts. Iran has not seen such violent protests since November 2019, when people took to the streets over the price of oil.
The leaders of Italy's right-wing coalition held their closing rally in Rome, 3 days ahead of an election they hoped to win. Thousands of supporters gathered to see Silvio Berlusconi, Matteo Salvini and Giorgia Meloni, who could become the first post-fascist leader of a founding EU member state. Euronews correspondent Giorgio Orlandi reports.
Right-wing political leaders have gathered here in Rome for the final push. They're here to convince undecided voters, but also to greet the many supporters who have met here under tight security measures. And judging by the large crowd, it seems that they have been warmly welcomed by their supporters. There's a lot of optimism in the air. That's perhaps because the right-wing coalition was leading the polls before a polling embargo kicked in only 2 weeks before Election Day. In this very square on Friday, the left-wing coalition will be gathering here for its final rally, and it seems that the challenge really lies in the numbers, and it's all about how many supporters the two opposite coalitions will manage to drag over here. And we'll find out after Sunday whether or not this is going to be an indication of who's going to be the winner of these elections. Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews in Rome.
A moment of silence was observed in Australia's Parliament House to honour former Queen Elizabeth II. The packed room included the sovereign's representative there, other dignitaries, and the country's Prime Minister, who had just returned to the country from attending the Queen's funeral in person on Monday.
Perhaps the greatest tribute we can offer her family and her memory is not a marble statue or a metal plaque. It is a renewed embrace of service to community, a truer understanding of our duty to others, a stronger commitment to respect for all.
The sentiment was not shared across the country. On Thursday, anti-monarchy rallies attracted thousands of people, and protesters tried to draw attention to the harm British colonizers cause Indigenous Australians and its lasting effects to this day.
She signed during her time of reign was, if you go back through the legal documents and all the documents that incarcerated our people, it was her signature that was on them. And so she's not innocent in no way, shape or form.
Australia is one of the few former British colonies that never struck a treaty with its Indigenous population, though the country is planning to change its constitution through a referendum that would give the population a greater say on the politics that affect their lives.
20 people were injured in a stampede when thousands thronged counters selling tickets for an India-Australia 2020 cricket match in southern India. Nearly 30,000 people were waiting in long lines for only 3,000 tickets for Sunday's match, and police used batons to try and control the crowd. India is hosting Australia in a 3-match T20 series.